What is REM sleep?
REM sleep is rapid eye movement sleep. It is characterized by faster breathing and heart rates than NREM, non-rapid eye movement, sleep. The only people who do not have REM sleep are those who have been blind from birth. REM sleep usually occurs in 4 to 5 periods, varying from 5 minutes to about an hour, growing progressively longer as sleep continues.
Which are the largest and smallest muscles in the human body?
The largest muscle is the gluteus maximus, buttock muscle, which moves the thigh bone away from the body and straightens out the hip joint. It is also one of the stronger muscles in the body. The smallest muscle is the stapedius in the middle ear. It is thinner than a thread and 0.05 inches, 0.127 centimeters, in length. It activates the stirrup that sends vibrations from the eardrum to the inner ear.
How many neurons are in the nervous system?
There are approximately 20 billion neurons in the nervous system.
What is a reflex?
A reflex is a predictable, involuntary response to a stimulus. It was given this name in the 18th century because it appeared that the stimulus was reflected off of the spinal cord to generate the response, just as light is reflected by a mirror. Reflexes allow the body to respond quickly to internal and external changes in the environment in order to maintain homeostasis. Reflexes that involve the skeletal muscles are called somatic reflexes. Reflexes that involve responses of smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, or a gland are called visceral or autonomic reflexes.
Who was the first woman in space?
Valentina V. Tereshkova Nikolava, 1937, a Soviet cosmonaut, was the first woman in space. She was aboard the Vostok 6, launched June 16, 1963. She spent 3 days circling Earth, completing 48 orbits. Although she had little cosmonaut training, she was an accomplished parachutist and was especially fit for the rigors of space travel. The U.S. space program did not put a woman in space until 20 years later when, on June 18, 1983, Sally K. Ride, 1951, flew aboard the Space Shuttle Challenger mission STS-7. In 1987, she moved to the administrative side of NASA and was instrumental in issuing the ride report. which recommended future missions and direction for NASA. She retired from NASA in August 1987 to become a research fellow at Stanford University after serving on the presidential commission that investigated the Challenger disaster in 1986. She was a physics professor at the University of California, San Diego until 2001 when she founded Sally Ride Science. The company is dedicated to supporting girls' and boys' interests in science, math, and technology by showing science is fun with a variety of programs.
How does driving speed affect gas mileage for most automobiles?
Most automobiles get about 28% more miles per gallon of fuel at 50 miles. 80.5 kilometers per hour than at 70 miles, 112 kilometers per hour, and about 21% more at 55 miles. 88.5 kilometers per hour than at 70 miles, 112 kilometers per hour.
What is the message attached to the Voyager spacecraft?
Voyager 1, launched September 5, 1977, and Voyager 2, launched August 20, 1977. Were unmanned space probes designed to explore the outer planets and then travel out of the solar system. A gold-coated copper phonograph record containing a message to any possible extraterrestrial civilization that they might encounter is attached to each spacecraft. The record contains both video and audio images of Earth and the civilization that sent this message to the stars. The record begins with 118 pictures. These show Earth's position in the galaxy, a key to the mathematical notation used in other pictures. The Sun, other planets in the solar system, human anatomy and reproduction. Various types of terrain, seashore, desert, mountains, examples of vegetation and animal life. People of both sexes and of all ages and ethnic types engaged in a number of activities, structures. From grass huts to the Taj Mahal to the Sydney Opera House, showing diverse architectural styles and means of transportation, including roads, bridges, cars, planes, and space vehicles. The pictures are followed by greetings from Jimmy Carter, who was then President of the United States, and Kurt Waldheim, then Secretary General of the United Nations. Brief messages in 54 languages, ranging from ancient Sumerian to English, are included, as is a song of the humpback whale. The next section is a series of sounds common to Earth. These include thunder, rain, wind, fire, barking dogs, footsteps, laughter. Human speech, the cry of an infant, and the sounds of a human heartbeat and human brainwaves. The record concludes with approximately 90 minutes of music, Earth's greatest hits. These musical selections were drawn from a broad spectrum of cultures and include such diverse pieces as A Pygmy Girl's Initiation Song, Bagpipe music from Azerbaijan, the Fifth Symphony. First movement by Ludwig van Beethoven, and Johnny Be Good by Chuck Berry. It will be tens, or even hundreds of thousands of years before either Voyager comes close to another star, and perhaps the message will never be heard. But it is a sign of humanity's hope to encounter life elsewhere in the universe.
Is there a Nobel Prize in mathematics?
We do not know for certain why Alfred Nobel did not establish a prize in mathematics. There are several theories revolving around his relationship and dislike for Gösta Mittag-Leffler. 1846 to 1927, the leading Swedish mathematician in Nobel's time. Most likely it never occurred to Nobel, or he decided against another prize. The Fields Medal in mathematics is generally considered as prestigious as the Nobel Prize. The Fields Medal was first awarded in 1936. Its full name is now the C.R.M. Fields PIMS Prize. The 2009 winner was Martin Barlow, 1953. For his work in probability and in the behavior of diffusions on fractals and other disordered media.
What is unusual about the way the emperor penguin's eggs are incubated?
Each female emperor penguin, Aptenidites fursteri, lays one large egg. Initially, both sexes share in incubating the egg by carrying it on his or her feet and covering it with a fold of skin. After a few days of passing the egg back and forth, the female leaves to feed in the open water of the Arctic Ocean. Balancing their eggs on their feet, the male penguins shuffle about the rookery, periodically huddling together for warmth during blizzards and frigid weather. If an egg is inadvertently orphaned, a male with no egg will quickly adopt it. 2 months after the female's departure, the chick hatches. The male feeds it with a milky substance he regurgitates until the female returns, now padded with blubber. The females take over, feeding the chicks with fish they have stored in their crops. The females do not return to their mate, however, but wander from male to male until one allows her to take his chick. It is then the male's turn to feed in open water and restore the fat layer they lost while incubating.
How do rainbows occur?
A rainbow is a spectrum of light formed when sunlight interacts with droplets. Upon entering a water droplet, the white light is refracted, and dispersed. That is, spread apart into its individual wavelengths, just as in a prism. The light inside the droplet then reflects against the back of the water droplet before it refracts and disperses as it exits the droplet. The angle between entering and leaving is 40 degrees for blue light, 42 degrees for red.
What is the only American canine that can climb trees?
The gray fox, Urocyon cinerio argenteus, is the only American canine that can climb trees.
What is the major function of the nucleus?
The nucleus is the information center for the cell and the storehouse of the genetic information. DNA, that directs all of the activities of a living eukaryotic cell. It is usually the largest organelle in a eukaryotic cell and contains the chromosomes.
What is a small solar system body?
The International Astronomical Union defines a small solar system body as all objects that orbit the Sun and are too small for their own gravity to pull them into a nearly spherical shape. Simply stated, they are all objects that do not meet the definition of a planet or dwarf planet. Examples of small solar system bodies are asteroids, near-Earth objects. Mars and Jupiter Trojan asteroids, most centaurs, most trans-Neptunian objects, and comets.
How are genes controlled?
Genes are controlled by regulatory mechanisms that vary by whether the organism is a prokaryote or a eukaryote. Bacteria, prokaryote, genes can be regulated by DNA-binding proteins that influence the rate of transcription, or by global regulatory mechanisms that refer to an organism's response to specific environmental stimuli such as heat shock. This is particularly important in bacteria. Gene control in eukaryotes depends on a complex set of regulatory elements that turn genes off and on at specific times. Among these regulatory elements are DNA-binding proteins as well as proteins that, in turn, control the activity of the DNA-binding proteins.
How deadly is strychnine?
The fatal dose of strychnine or deadly nightshade. The plant from which it is obtained is 0.0005 to 0.001 ounces, 15 to 30 milligrams. It causes severe convulsions and respiratory failure. If the patient lives for 24 hours, recovery is probable.
What was the flower clock of Linnaeus?
Carolus Linnaeus, 1707 to 1778, who was responsible for the binomial nomenclature, classification system of living organisms, invented a floral clock to tell the time of day. he had observed over a number of years that certain plants consistently opened and closed their flowers at particular times of the day. These times varied from species to species. One could deduce the approximate time of day according to which species had opened or closed its flowers. Linnaeus planted a garden displaying local flowers, arranged in sequence of flowering throughout the day, that would flower even on cloudy or cold days. He called it a horologium flori or flower clock.
How did the navel orange originate?
Navel oranges are oranges without seeds. In the early 19th century, an orange tree in a Brazilian orchard produced seedless fruit, although the rest of the trees in the orchard produced seeded oranges. This naturally occurring mutation gave rise to what we now refer to as the navel orange. A bud from the mutant tree was grafted onto another orange tree. Branches that resulted were then grafted onto other trees, soon creating orchards of navel orange trees.
Why is sulfuric acid important?
Sometimes called oil of vitriol, or vitriolic acid, sulfuric acid. H2SO4 has become one of the most important of all chemicals. It was little used until it became essential for the manufacture of soda in the 18th century. It is prepared industrially by the reaction of water with sulfur trioxide, which in turn is made by chemical combination of sulfur dioxide and oxygen by one of two processes: the contact process or the chamber process. Many manufactured articles in common use depend in some way on sulfuric acid for their production. 90% of the sulfuric acid manufactured in the United States is used in the production of fertilizers and other inorganic chemicals.
What are halcyon days?
This term is often used to refer to a time of peace or prosperity. Among sailors, it is the 2-week period of calm weather before and after the shortest day of the year, approximately December 21st. The phrase is taken from halcyon, the name the ancient Greeks gave to the kingfisher. According to legend, the halcyon built its nest on the surface of the ocean and was able to quiet the winds while its eggs were hatching.
What is the sunspot cycle?
It is the fluctuating number of sunspots on the sun during an 11-year period. The variation in the number of sunspots seems to correspond with the increase or decrease in the number of solar flares. An increased number of sunspots means an increased number of solar flares.
How are Celsius temperatures converted into Fahrenheit temperatures?
The formulas for converting Celsius temperatures into Fahrenheit and the reverse are as follows: F equals C x 9/5 plus 32 C equals F 32 x 5/9.
Which pollutants lead to indoor air pollution?
Indoor air pollution, also known as sick building syndrome, results from conditions in modern high energy efficiency buildings that have reduced outside air exchange or have inadequate ventilation, chemical contamination, and microbial contamination. Indoor air pollution can produce various symptoms, such as headache, nausea, and eye, nose, and throat irritation. In addition, houses are affected by indoor air pollution emanating from consumer and building products and from tobacco smoke.
How fast do a hummingbird's wings move?
Hummingbirds are the only family of birds that can truly hover in still air for any length of time. They need to do so in order to hang in front of a flower while they perform the delicate task of inserting their slim, sharp bills into its depths to drink nectar. Their thin wings are not contoured into the shape of aerofoils and do not generate lift in this way. Their paddle-shaped wings are, in effect, hands that swivel at the shoulder. They beat them in such a way that the tip of each wing follows the line of a figure 8 lying on its side. The wing moves forward and downwards into the front loop of the 8, creating lift. As it begins to come up and go back, the wing twists through 180 degrees so that once again it creates a downward thrust. The hummingbird's method of flying does have one major limitation. The smaller the wing, the faster it has to beat in order to produce sufficient downward thrust. An average-sized hummingbird beats its wings 25 times per second. Small species beat their wings 50 to 80 times per second, and even faster during courtship displays. The bee hummingbird, native to Cuba, is only 2 inches, 5 centimeters long and beats its wings at an astonishing 200 times per second.
What are the functions of stems?
The 4 main functions of stems are: 1. To support leaves, 2. To produce carbohydrates, 3. To store materials such as water and starch, and 4. To transport water and solutes between roots and leaves. Stems provide the link between the water and dissolved nutrients of the soil and the leaves.
What is synthetic skin?
The material consists of a very porous collagen fiber bonded to a sugar polymer. Glycominoglycan, obtained from shark cartilage. It is covered by a sheet of silicon rubber. It was developed by Yanis V. Yanis. 1935, and his colleagues at Massachusetts Institute of Technology around 1985. Soon after its introduction, synthetic skin was used to successfully treat more than 100 severely burned victims.
What are the similarities and differences between the nervous system and the endocrine system?
The endocrine and nervous are both regulatory systems that permit communication between cells, tissues, and organs. Both systems are devoted to maintaining homeostasis by coordinating and regulating the activities of other cells, tissues, organs, and systems. Both systems are regulated by negative feedback mechanisms. Chemical messengers are important in both systems. Although their method of transmission and release differs in the two systems, a major difference between the endocrine system and nervous system is the rate of response to a stimulus. In general, the nervous system responds to a stimulus very rapidly, often within a few milliseconds, while it may take the endocrine system seconds and sometimes hours or even days to offer a response. Furthermore, the chemical signals released by the nervous system typically act over very short distances. A synapse, while hormones in the endocrine system are generally carried by the blood to target organs. Finally, the effects of the nervous system generally last only a brief amount of time, while those of the endocrine system are longer lasting.
What are monoclonal antibodies?
Monoclonal antibodies are artificially produced antibodies designed to neutralize a specific foreign protein, antigen. Clone cells, genetically identical, are stimulated to produce antibodies to the target antigen. Most monoclonal antibody work so far has used clone cells from mice infected with cancer. In some cases they are used to destroy cancer cells directly. In others they carry other drugs to combat the cancer cells.
What is the Big Dipper?
The Big Dipper is a group of 7 stars that are part of the constellation Ursa Major. They appear to form a sort of bowl, composed of 4 stars, with a long handle, composed of 3 stars. The group is known as the Plough in Great Britain. The Big Dipper is almost always visible in the northern hemisphere. It serves as a convenient reference point when locating other stars, for example. An imaginary line drawn from the 2 end stars of the Dipper leads to Polaris, the North Star.
What is quicksand?
Quicksand is a mass of sand and mud that contains a large amount of water. A thin film separates individual grains of sand, so the mixture has the characteristics of a liquid. Quicksand is found at the mouths of large rivers or other areas that have a constant source of water. Heavy objects, including humans, can sink when encountering quicksand and the mixture collapses. However, since the density of the sand/water mix is slightly greater than the density of the human body, most humans can actually float on quicksand.
Who invented the ancient Chinese earthquake detector?
The detector, invented by Zhang Heng, 78 to 139 C. E. Around 132 CE, was a copper-domed urn with dragon's heads circling the outside, each containing a bronze ball. Inside the dome was suspended a pendulum that would swing when the ground shook and knock a ball from the mouth of a dragon into the waiting open mouth of a bronze toad below. The ball made a loud noise and signaled the occurrence of an earthquake. Knowing which ball had been released, one could determine the direction of the earthquake's epicenter. The point on Earth's surface directly above the quake's point of origin.
Are there specific criteria to prompt the National Weather Service to issue an advisory, watch, or warning?
Certain advisories, watches, or warnings are issued when specific conditions are met, while others will vary by location. Examples of when some common National Weather Service advisories, watches, and warnings issued are: Hurricane Watch, issued when a hurricane poses a possible threat to specific coastal areas, generally within 36 hours. Hurricane Warning, issued when sustained winds of 74 miles per hour, 119 kilometers per hour, or higher associated with a hurricane are expected in a specified coastal area in 24 hours or less. A hurricane warning may remain in effect even when winds are below hurricane force. When dangerously high water and/or exceptionally high waves continue to persist.
Which is the deepest cave in the United States?
Lechuguilla Cave, in Carlsbad Caverns National Park, New Mexico, is the deepest cave in the United States. Its depth is 1,565 feet, 477 meters. Unlike most caves in which carbon dioxide mixes with rainwater to produce carbonic acid, Carlsbad Caverns was shaped by sulfuric acid. The sulfuric acid was a result of a reaction between oxygen that was dissolved in groundwater and hydrogen sulfide that emanated from far below the cave's surface.
How does an in vivo study differ from an in vitro study?
An in vivo study uses living biological organisms and specimens. In contrast, an in vitro biological study is carried out in isolation from a living organism, such as in a petri dish or test tube.
How did scientists decide that DNA was the genetic material for all cellular organisms?
The proof that the material basis for a gene is DNA came from the work of Oswald T. Avery, 1877–1955, Colin M. MacLeod, 1909–1972, and Macklin McCarty, 1911–2005, in a paper published in 1944. This group of scientists followed the work of Frederick Griffith, 1879–1941, in order to discover what causes non-lethal bacteria to transform to a lethal strain. Using specific enzymes, all parts of the lethal bacteria were degraded, including the sugar-like coat, the proteins, and the RNA. The degradation of these substances by enzymes did not affect the transformation process. Finally, when the lethal bacteria were exposed to DNase, an enzyme that destroys DNA, all transformation activity ceased. The transforming factor was DNA.
What are gymnosperms and which plants are included in this group?
Gymnosperms, from the Greek terms gymnos, meaning naked, and sperma, meaning seed, produce seeds that are totally exposed or borne on the scales of cones. The four phyla of gymnosperms are, Coniferophyta, conifers including pine, spruce, hemlock and fir. Ginkgophyta, consisting of one species, the ginkgo or maidenhair tree, Cycladophyta. The cycads or ornamental plants, and Gnetophyta, a collection of very unusual vines and trees.
What was the first scientific journal?
The first scientific journal was Journal des Savants, published and edited by Denis de Salo, 1626–1669. The first issue appeared on January 5, 1665. It contained reviews of books, obituaries of famous men, experimental findings in chemistry and physics, and other general interest information. Publication was suspended following the 13th issue in March 1665. Although the official reason for the suspension of the publication was that de Salo was not submitting his proofs for official approval prior to publication. There is speculation that the real reason for the suspension was his criticism of the work of important people, papal policy, and the old orthodox views of science. It was reinstated in January 1666 and continued as a weekly publication until 1724. The journal was then published on a monthly basis until the French Revolution. In 1792. It was published briefly in 1797 under the title Journal des Savants. It began regular publication again in 1816 under the auspices of the Institut de France, evolving as a general interest publication.
When will Halley's Comet return?
Halley's Comet returns about every 76 years. It was most recently seen in 1986 and is predicted to appear again in 2061, then in 2134. Every appearance of what is now known as Comet Halley has been noted by astronomers since the year 239 BCE. The comet is named for Edmund Halley, 1656 to 1742, England's second astronomer royal. In 1682 he observed a bright comet and noted that it was moving in an orbit similar to comets seen in 1531 and 1607. He concluded that the three comets were actually one and the same, and that the comet had an orbit of 76 years. In 1705 Halley published a synopsis of the astronomy of comets, in which he predicted that the comet seen in 1531, 1607, and 1682 would return in 1758. On Christmas night, 1758. A German farmer and amateur astronomer named Johann Palitzsch spotted the comet in just the area of the sky that Halley had foretold. Prior to Halley, comets appeared at irregular intervals and were often thought to be harbingers of disaster and signs of divine wrath. Halley proved that they are natural objects subject to the laws of gravity.
What are the sources of oil pollution in the oceans?
Most oil pollution results from minor spillage from tankers and accidental discharges of oil when oil tankers are loaded and unloaded. Other sources of oil pollution include improper disposal of used motor oil, oil leaks from motor vehicles, routine ship maintenance, leaks in pipelines that transport oil, and accidents at storage facilities and refineries.
Why do geese fly in formation?
Aerodynamicists have suspected that long-distance migratory birds, such as geese and swans, adapt the V formation in order to reduce the amount of energy needed for such long flights. According to theoretical calculations, birds flying in a V formation can fly some 10% farther than a lone bird can. Formation flying lessens the drag, the air pressure that pushes against the wings. The effect is similar to flying in a thermal upcurrent, where less total lift power is needed. In addition, when flying, each bird creates behind it a small area of disturbed air. Any bird flying directly behind it would be caught in this turbulence. In the V formation of Canada geese, each bird flies not directly behind the other, but to one side or above the bird in front.
What is the difference between a virus and a viroid?
Viroids are small fragments of nucleic acid, RNA, without a protein coat. They are usually associated with plant diseases and are several thousand times smaller than a virus.
How is speleothem defined?
Speleothem is a term given to those cave features that form after a cave itself has formed. They are secondary mineral deposits that are created by the solidification of fluids or from chemical solutions. These mineral deposits usually contain calcium carbonate, Caco3, or limestone, but gypsum or silica may also be found. Stalactites, stalagmites, soda straws, cave coral, boxwork, and cave pearls are all types of speleothems.
Is lodestone a magnet?
Lodestone is a naturally occurring variety of magnetic iron oxide or magnetite. Lodestone is frequently called a natural magnet because it attracts iron objects and possesses polarity. It was used by early mariners to find magnetic north. Other names for lodestone are lodestone, leading stone, and Hercules stone.
Is coral bleaching related to changes in the environment?
Although corals can capture prey, many tropical species are dependent on photosynthetic algae, zooxanthellae, for nutrition. These algae live within the cells that line the digestive cavity of the coral. The symbiotic relationship between coral and zooxanthellae is mutually beneficial. The algae provide the coral with oxygen and carbon and nitrogen compounds. The coral supplies the algae with ammonia, waste product, from which the algae make nitrogenous compounds for both partners. Coral bleaching is the stress-induced loss of zooxanthellae that live in coral cells. In coral bleaching, the algae lose their pigmentation or are expelled from coral cells. Without the algae, coral become malnourished and die. The causes of coral bleaching are not completely understood, but it is believed that environmental factors are involved. Pollution, invasive bacteria such as Vibrio, salinity changes, temperature changes, and high concentrations of ultraviolet radiation, associated with the destruction of the ozone layer, all contribute to coral bleaching.
What was the first national scientific society organized in the United States?
The first national scientific society organized in the United States was the American Association for the Advancement of Science, AAAS. It was established on September 20, 1848, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, for the purpose of advancing science in every way. The first president of the AAAS was William Charles Redfield, 1789 to 1857.
What is a tufa?
It is a general name for calcium carbonate, CaCO3, deposits or spongy porous limestone found at springs in limestone areas, or in caves as massive stalactite or stalagmite deposits. Tufa, derived from the Italian word for soft rock, is formed by the precipitation of calcite from the water of streams and springs.
Who were the congenitally joined twins who gave rise to the term Siamese twins?
The term Siamese twins originated with the appearance of Chang and Ang Bunker, 1811 to 1874. Conjoined Chinese twins born in Siam, now Thailand, who were used as a circus attraction by P. T. Barnum, 1810 to 1891. Siamese twins are identical twins joined at some point of their bodies. Most commonly at the hip, chest, abdomen, buttocks, or head. Like other identical twins, they originate from a single fertilized egg, in the case of congenitally joined twins. However, the egg fails to split into two separate cell masses at the proper time. The condition is relatively rare, only about 500 cases have been reported worldwide. Surgery to separate Siamese twins is a complex task, and often results in the death of one or both of the twins.
How does a food chain function?
A food chain is the transfer of food energy from the source in plants through a series of organisms eating and being eaten by other organisms. Food chains overlap because many organisms eat more than one type of food, so that these chains can look more like food webs. In 1891, German zoologist Karl Semper, 1832 to 1893, introduced the food chain concept.
Is white gold really gold?
White gold is the name of a class of jewelers' white alloys used as substitutes for platinum. Different grades vary widely in composition, but usual alloys consist of between 20% and 50% nickel, with the balance gold. A superior class of white gold is made of 90% gold and 10% palladium. Other elements used include copper and zinc. The main use of these alloys is to give the gold a white color.
How often is the epithelium replaced?
Epithelial cells are constantly being replaced and regenerated during an individual's lifetime. The epidermis, outer layer of the skin, is renewed every 2 weeks. A totally new epidermis is produced every 25 to 30 days. The epithelial lining of the stomach is replaced every 2 to 3 days. The lining of the respiratory tract is only replaced every 5 to 6 weeks. The liver, a gland consisting of epithelial tissue, easily regenerates after portions are removed surgically.
When was the first artificial heart used?
On December 2, 1982, Dr. Barney B. Clark, 1921 to 1983, a 61-year-old retired dentist, became the first human to receive a permanently implanted artificial heart. It was known as the Jarvik 7 after its inventor, Dr. Robert Jarvik. 1946. The 7.5-hour operation was performed by Dr. William DeVries, 1943, a surgeon at the University of Utah Medical Center. Dr. Clark died on March 23, 1983, 112 days later. In Louisville, Kentucky, William Schroeder, 1923 to 1986, survived 620 days with an artificial heart. November 25, 1984, to August 7, 1986. On January 11, 1990, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration (FDA) recalled the Jarvik 7, which had been the only artificial heart approved by the FDA for use. 2 models of a total artificial heart, TA, are now available that can replace the ventricles, the 2 lower chambers, of the heart. Eligible patients must have end-stage heart failure, meaning all treatments except a heart transplant have failed. A TA may keep patients alive while they wait for heart transplants, or may keep patients alive who are not eligible for a heart transplant. The 2 brands are the Cardioist and ABIOCOR. The Cardioist is connected to a power source outside of the body via tubes that run from inside the chest to the outside through holes in the abdomen. The ABIOCOR is a battery-powered TA that is completely contained in the chest. The battery is charged through the skin with a special magnetic charger.
Which elements are liquid at room temperature?
Mercury, liquid silver, Hg, element 80, and bromine, Br. Element 35, are liquid at room temperature 68 degrees to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 20 degrees to 21 degrees Celsius. Gallium, Ga, element 31, with a melting point of 85.6 degrees Fahrenheit 29.8 degrees Celsius, cesium, Cs. Element 55, with a melting point of 83 degrees Fahrenheit 28.4 degrees Celsius, and francium, Fr, element 87, with a melting point of 80.6 degrees Fahrenheit. 27 degrees Celsius, are liquid at slightly above room temperature and pressure.
What is the difference between freezing rain and sleet?
Freezing rain is rain that falls as a liquid but turns to ice on contact with a freezing object to form a smooth ice coating called glaze. Usually freezing rain only lasts a short time, because it either turns to rain or to snow. Sleet is frozen or partially frozen rain in the form of ice pellets. Sleet forms when rain falls from a warm layer of air, passes through a freezing air layer near Earth's surface, and forms hard, clear, tiny ice pellets that can hit the ground so fast that they bounce off with a sharp click.
What is the longest muscle in the human body?
The longest muscle is the sartorius, which runs from the waist to the knee. Its purpose is to flex the hip and knee.
Who was Charles Darwin?
The theory of natural selection proposed by Charles Darwin, 1809 to 1882, revolutionized all aspects of natural science. Darwin was born into a family of physicians and planned to follow his father and grandfather in that profession. Unable to stand the sight of blood, he studied divinity at Cambridge and received a degree from the university in 1830.
Who devised one of the earliest systems for animal and plant classification?
The naming and organizing of the millions of species of plants and animals is frequently called taxonomy. Such classifications provide a basis for comparisons and generalizations. Carolus Linnaeus composed a classification system for two major groups, plants, 1753, and animals, 1758. He categorized the organisms by perceived physical differences and similarities. Every plant and animal was given two scientific names, binomial method, in Latin. One for the species and the other for the group or genus within the species. This system of nomenclature, naming, continues to be used today. Examples of binomial nomenclature include, Schistocerca americana, grasshopper, and Pinus strobus, white pine.
Is it possible to count to infinity?
No. Very large finite numbers are not the same as infinite numbers. Infinite numbers are defined as being unbounded, or without limit. Any number that can be reached by counting or by representation of a number followed by billions of zeros is a finite number.
What is synthetic skin?
The material consists of a very porous collagen fiber bonded to a sugar polymer. Glycominoglycan, obtained from shark cartilage. It is covered by a sheet of silicon rubber. It was developed by Yanis V. Yanis, 1935, and his colleagues at Massachusetts Institute of Technology around 1985. Soon after its introduction, synthetic skin was used to successfully treat more than 100 severely burned victims.
What percent of human body weight is water?
The human body is 61.8% water by weight. Water is found in every tissue.
What is the Oparin-Haldane hypothesis?
In the 1920s, while working independently, Alexandre Oparin, 1894 to 1980, and John Haldane, 1892 to 1964, both proposed scenarios for the prebiotic conditions on Earth. The conditions that would have allowed organic life to evolve. Although they differed on details, both models described an early Earth with an atmosphere containing ammonia and water vapor. Both also surmised that the assemblage of organic molecules began in the atmosphere and then moved into the seas. The steps of the Oparin-Haldane model are: organic molecules, including amino acids and nucleotides, are synthesized abiotically, without living cells. Organic building blocks in the prebiotic soup are assembled into polymers of proteins and nucleic acids. Biological polymers are assembled into a self-replicating organism that fed on the existing organic molecules.
Besides the light year, what other units are used to measure distances in astronomy?
The astronomical unit, O, is often used to measure distances within the solar system. 1 O is equal to the average distance between Earth and the Sun, or 92,955,630 miles, 149,597,870 kilometers. The parsec is equal to 3.26 light-years, or about 19.18 trillion miles, 30.82 trillion kilometers.
What is a silicon chip?
A silicon chip is an almost pure piece of silicon. usually less than 1 centimeter square and about half a millimeter thick. It contains hundreds of thousands of miniaturized electronic circuit components, mainly transistors, packed and interconnected in layers beneath the surface. These components can perform control, logic, and memory functions. There is a grid of thin metallic strips on the surface of the chip. These wires are used for electrical connections to other devices. The silicon chip was developed independently by two researchers, Jack Kilby, 1923 to 2005, of Texas Instruments in 1958, and Robert Noyce, 1927 to 1990, of Fairchild Semiconductor in 1959. Jack Kilby was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2000 for his discovery of the silicon chip. While silicon chips are essential to almost all computer operations today, a myriad of other devices depend on them as well, including calculators, microwave ovens, automobiles, and VCRs.
National Park Service established.
The National Park Service was created by an act signed by President Woodrow Wilson, 1856 to 1924, on August 25, 1916. Its responsibility was to administer national parks and monuments.
How does the sense of smell work?
The sense of smell is associated with sensory receptor cells in the upper nasal cavity. The smell, or olfactory, receptors are chemoreceptors. Chemicals that stimulate olfactory receptors enter the nasal cavity as airborne molecules called gases. They must dissolve in the watery fluids that surround the cilia of the olfactory receptor cells before they can be detected. These specialized cells, the olfactory receptor neurons, are the only parts of the nervous system that are in direct contact with the outside environment. The odorous gases then waft up to the olfactory cells, where the chemicals bind to the cilia that line the nasal cavity. That action initiates a nerve impulse being sent through the olfactory cell into the olfactory nerve fiber, to the olfactory bulb, and to the brain. The brain then knows what the chemical odors are.
The most frequently collected items were: how much oil was spilled into the Caribbean Sea when the British Petroleum offshore oil rig exploded in 2010?
The largest accidental oil spill in the world began April 20, 2010 when the BP Deepwater Horizon rig exploded in the Gulf of Mexico. Initial estimates reported that only 1,000 barrels of oil per day were being released into the Gulf. These estimates quickly changed to 5,000 barrels per day and then 12,000 to 19,000 barrels per day by late May. As researchers continued to evaluate the situation, the estimate continued to rise until they determined that an average of 53,000 barrels of oil were released per day between April 20 and July 15. 2010. The final estimate was 5 million barrels of oil flowed into the Gulf of Mexico, making it the largest oil spill ever.
What is the lightest known solid?
The lightest solid is silica aerogels, made of tiny spheres of bonded silicon and oxygen atoms linked together into long strands separated with air pockets. They appear almost like frozen wisps of smoke. They also have the lowest conductivity, lowest solid density, highest porosity, highest surface area, and the highest dielectric constant, giving them the potential of being used in many applications. Understandably, their use is not currently widespread due to the expense to create them and the difficulty in insulating capabilities will allow their use in place of fiberglass and polyurethane foam, significantly reducing global energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions.
What are the uses of peat moss?
Peat moss, genus Sphagnum, grows mostly in bogs. Peat mosses are favored by gardeners for their ability to increase the water-holding capacity of soils. Due to large, dead cells in their leaf-like parts, they are able to absorb 5 times as much water as cotton plants. Peat mosses are also used as damp cushions by florists to keep other plants and flowers damp. Species of sphagnum also have medicinal purposes. Certain Aboriginal people use peat mosses as disinfectants and, due to their absorbency, as diapers. Peat moss is acidic and is an ideal dressing for wounds. During World War I, the British used more than 1 million wound dressings made of peat moss. Native North Americans used species of the genera Neem and Bryum to treat burns. In Europe, species of the genus Dichronoesia have been used to waterproof roofs.
How many people visit a dentist regularly?
Only about half the population visits a dentist as often as once a year. Children, ages 2 to 17, visit the dentist more frequently than adults.
How many different animals are there?
Biologists have described and named more than 1 million species of animals. And some biologists believe that there are several million more species that remain to be discovered, classified, and named.
How is nuclear waste stored?
Nuclear wastes consist either of fission products formed from the splitting of uranium, cesium, strontium, or krypton, or from transuranic elements formed when uranium atoms absorb free neutrons. Wastes from transuranic elements are less radioactive than fission products. However, these elements remain radioactive far longer, hundreds of thousands of years. The types of waste are irradiated fuel, spent fuel, in the form of 12-foot, 4-meter, long rods. High-level radioactive waste in the form of liquid or sludge, and low-level waste. Non-transuranic or legally high-level, in the form of reactor hardware, piping, toxic resins. Water from fuel pool, and other items that have become contaminated with radioactivity. Currently, most spent nuclear fuel in the United States is safely stored in specially designed pools at individual reactor sites around the country. If pool capacity is reached, licensees may move toward use of above-ground dry storage casks. The 3 low-level radioactive waste disposal sites are Barnwell, located in South Carolina, Hanford, located in Washington, and EnviroCare, located in Utah. Each site accepts low-level radioactive waste from specific regions of the country. Most high-level nuclear waste has been stored in double-walled stainless steel tanks surrounded by 3 feet, 1 meter, of concrete. The current best storage method, developed by the French in 1978, is to incorporate the waste into a special molten glass mixture. Then enclose it in a steel container and bury it in a special pit. The Nuclear Waste Policy Act of 1982 specified that high-level radioactive waste would be disposed of underground in a deep geologic repository. Yucca Mountain, Nevada, was chosen as the single site to be developed for disposal of high-level radioactive waste. However, the Yucca Mountain site continues to be controversial due to dormant volcanoes in the vicinity and known earthquake fault lines. As of 2010, the Energy Department withdrew its application for a nuclear waste repository at Yucca Mountain.